All right, with my brother Nick. So I'm glad I finally got you here. Right, we got it doing a podcast here live. I did yours. Nick, real estate investor, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Black Belt. Matt, Serra, Black Belt, podcaster, and here we are, man, in LA, hanging out.
I love it, man. Thanks for having me. You're always welcoming and kind, and you've showed us quite a day already, man. So I really appreciate it.
So glad, man. So glad we finally made it happen. The whole full experience, because we always meet up like early in the morning doing some private jiu-jitsu training, right? Early in the morning before your conferences and your meetings.
Yeah, no agenda this time. It was nice and easy. I said the only two rules I had for coming out this week was that we had to meet Alberto and we had to meet Jason Eisner. We have done those, so I'm happy, man.
Nice. You just did the cold plunge?
Man, I was such a disappointment with the cold plunge. I was like, I take cold showers. It's the same thing.
We'll go back. We'll do it again.
She would have been so disappointed in me. I got to do it again.
I'll do it with you.
I'll do it with you. Cool.
Yeah. How did you get into real estate?
So I was going to be, I tell everybody joking around, I took every test you could think of for like FBI, CIA, DEA, NYPD, everything with 3 or 4 letters I was testing for. I was initially going to college upstate and I really didn't want to do anything. And then September 11th happened. I decided I wanted to do something related to law enforcement and counterterrorism. So I switched my degree to criminal justice. And then after I graduated, those positions all take like a very long time. You have to test for the psychological weight, take the written weight, and they call you back. It takes years to really go through the whole process. So during that time, I went into construction.
Oh, wow.
And so when I was doing construction, I was working on a machine one day, faulty machinery came down, crushed my hand. That turned into about a year and a half of just therapy and OT and PT. And then they started calling me back for those positions. And they told me, because of your hand injury, you'll never get a job in law enforcement or any of these federal jobs or any of this stuff. So couldn't do construction, couldn't do law enforcement, didn't really know what I was going to have to fall back on. And then my mom followed me around with the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I know you and I talked about that and Think and Grow Rich and stuff like that. So she followed me around with the book, and I saw during that book that 70% of all millionaires made their money through real estate, and you didn't need any money or any credit starting out. I had no money, no credit, no experience, nothing. So I was like, well, I feel like I checked that box. So started learning, getting educated, taking courses, going to all the classes and stuff that would come through the area, and eventually wound up finding some mentors and accidentally falling into real estate because I was in the process of having like a year and a half home just to heal. And I was like, I'll probably never have that opportunity again in my life to just dive into this. So if I can figure this out now during this window, I'll never have to go do something else. And because I had what I thought was such a good plan, I tested very high in a lot of those federal jobs, like 60, 70 out of like 19, 20,000. I thought everything was so safe and secure with like, I'll get the degree, I'll get the job. And then when that gets all taken away from you overnight, it puts you in this weird spot of realizing that you can't rely on anybody else. And so real estate became the thing where I went, you know what, I can't ever put myself in a position where I'm relying on somebody else for income, because who knows what else could happen. So kind of fell backwards into real estate and just never really went back after that, went in full time.
Wow. Because of one thing changed everything. Your hand, you wouldn't get hired, and your mom. So how did your mom find those books, or how did she?
I feel like she did the mom book club thing for a while, where they, I just always had stuff kind of coming in the mail. But it was really interesting when you think back, because I remember she had that book, and she was always putting things in my head. Oh, okay, look at this, watch this. She had a little bit of that entrepreneurial stuff. She was always looking for all the normal stuff people do, selling soap, prepaid legal, all kinds of stuff. But I read that book, and I remember I told her, like, hey, I read the book, and I'm actually really interested in real estate. And she was like, hey, funny enough, this other book came, and it was The 1 Minute Millionaire by a guy named Robert Allen. And he was like the original no money down real estate guy. So she was like, hey, this book just came. It's really funny that you just read the other one. She's like, and then there's this conference that's coming to town, and it's like a free 2-hour thing, and you go and you learn about real estate, no money down. And so she really opened up that whole thing. And like that day that I mentioned it, that other book randomly came from her book club. And then there was a conference in New York that day, and everything just really lined up. It really was one of those, everything happens for a reason at the right time. And
you were ready for it.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow. So what was your first real estate deal?
Man, so it was interesting because all the stuff that I was unhappy about then, you look a year, 2, 3 years down the road and you realize all that stuff actually was one of the best things that happened to you. So I was very dead set on, I lived in New York. I wanted to only do real estate in New York. And it was so competitive, you know, especially starting out with like no money, no experience, any kind of stuff like that. But then I started looking at some of these other areas like Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, where you started to look for houses that were maybe $50,000, $60,000. You put 20, 30 in, and they're worth 150, 175. You turn around, you sell them, you refinance them. And at that time too, you could get those deals. It was right before the market crashed. I joke around. I say I feel like I caused the crash the second I was like, I'm in. Everybody was like, out.
2008.
Yeah, right around there. So it was, you could buy a property with no money down, no credit, none of that kind of stuff. Right. And they would actually give you a check back when you bought a property. So I went and I bought some rentals in Vegas, and then I bought some other properties in Michigan, and I used creative financing. But for me, those felt like safer deals because they felt like at 50, 60,000, if I make a mistake, it's not a colossal mistake versus in New York, if I make a mistake on a $600,000 deal, you know. But now I realize that if it's a deal, it's a deal. If it's a spread, it's a spread. But that was my comfort level at that time, is cheaper is better. So that was basically like my first 8 deals in 6 months were a few deals in Vegas where they would give you some money back as the down payment. And then you would take that money, you'd throw it into like a down payment on a hard money loan where they would give you the money to buy the properties, fix them up, put tenants in, and then sell them or refinance them out. So I started doing a lot of out-of-state stuff in Georgia, Michigan, and Vegas initially, and that forced me to learn how to invest out-of-state and start to put these different processes in place to connect with people and communicate with people. And I learned all the wrong ways to do stuff. I made all the mistakes. I did everything wrong. And then during the pandemic, everybody started turning towards Zoom meetings and doing stuff out of state, and it became a normal thing now, whereas people just started doing that over the last couple of years. I feel like I've been doing that for 15 years. So if I was dead set in only doing deals in New York and only doing deals in places I could see, I would never have opened up the whole literally country to be able to look at. Now I know if I just look at certain specs and certain optics and certain little check boxes to let me know that an area is safe, it opens up opportunities all over the country. So the analogy I tell people is if you think of every city and state as ponds, that means that you'll always have fish, regardless if everybody all of a sudden decides, well, hey, Pasadena's a great pond. I'm going to come there. I'm going to buy all the fish. I'm going to buy all the real estate. It gets too competitive. It's like, okay, well, I have all these other places I can still rely on to go get deals. And because of that, over the last 15 years, the markets we've worked in, they change. And you go to different places to get deals, different people to buy the deals from you, different requirements. But you always have a place to get deals. You always have a way to make money. And that's one of the things that, again, I was very resentful of the fact that I was forced to go invest out of state, and then you look back and you go, that was the best thing that ever happened to me business-wise.
So like, you know, your instinct would be to do something local that you can keep an eye on it, right? And then but you know, here in California, LA, it's like so expensive. New York, same thing, right? And so how do you do it out of state? You have a team, you have partners that you partner up with that are maybe there. How does it work?
Go to these other markets and you start to look at just the numbers, right. And you got to put those teams in place. So everybody's not going to conspire to come up with some situation to make you buy that deal. Somebody is going to come forward and say, hey man, don't buy this. This is the meth block. This is this block. This is that block. Like one specific, I remember the guy was like, look, your house is good if it was like 6 houses over. Where yours is on the corner and there's a hole in the fence and there's a liquor store next door. And nobody's going to want to live there with their kids because there's always like broken So it's like these little things like that where you go, hey, appreciate that. And then you basically just tell them the next time you go out, if you go out for somebody else and you see boarded up homes or falling down, like keep your eyes peeled for what you want. So you start to put those people in place that basically just verify what you think the numbers are, or they counter them and come back that it doesn't need this amount, it needs this amount, or it's not this. And then you just make the decision based off of that. Because when people forget, when you get an offer accepted, you generally have a minimum of 7 to 10 days from the time that's a written accepted contract, meaning both people sign it.
Right.
So I can get an extra 3 to 5 days before everything is even executed to get those people lined up and in there. And generally within that first week, I'm going to have multiple people coming in and out telling me if my numbers are correct and if my area is good. And if it is, awesome, then I move forward. And if it's not, then I either just back out or I renegotiate. If it's a numbers thing, I renegotiate. If it's an area thing, I'm out. But then kind of what we were just talking about is that's just the numbers part of it. So if the numbers check out, awesome. But I think where people go wrong out of state is they set it and they forget it. And I think they assume that just because a property's not in front of me, even though I'm not there, don't confuse that with that I don't know what's happening every day. I'm getting updates every single hour through Slack or through WhatsApp or something from my teams. I'm setting expectations now because we've done it the wrong way, my partner and I used to always be, well, they're doing the right thing. I don't have to babysit them. I haven't heard from them for 2 weeks, but it's probably fine. And then you realize that they moved in 2 weeks ago and they're like drunk sleeping on the floor and they're in the middle of a divorce and it's all those things. So I tell everybody that I came up with something I call the rule of 72, meaning you never want to go more than 72 hours without pictures and videos and reports back from your contractors during that construction. Because if you haven't had a problem with the contractor yet, you just haven't done enough real estate yet. It's 100% going to happen at some point. But if you catch problems when they're small, which is going to happen in any business.
Early, right?
Yeah, they don't get big. But that's where you have to get better at, like we talked about, those crucial conversations of getting them out. So maybe you do find out the contractor did something screwy, but you caught it in 2 or 3 days. You fired them, you got them out. Maybe your job got a little bit delayed. Maybe you went a little bit over budget, but you still made money and you were still fine. Versus you buy every excuse. Every time you fire them, they have a great excuse. My mother died, it's my birthday, my this, my that. And you start to go, I'll give them another chance, a third chance, a fourth chance. So that whole tagline of like, be slow to hire and be quick to fire, we've had to get very good at and just know sooner, like, we already know how this is going to go. We got to get them out of there. But I'll set those things like, let's say it's a rental property. I started putting things in place where I'll tell them, look, if you're going to work 12 to 5, at 12 o'clock, you have to FaceTime my assistant from the leasing office and say, look, I'm here, look around, I'm at the job, I'm sober, all the things that come up, you know? And then it's like, hey, here's my 3 priorities for the day, because one of my mentors always told me if you have more than 3 priorities in a day, you have no priorities in a day. So set them up for success. And then at 5 o'clock before they leave, they have to FaceTime my assistant again and say, hey, I'm still at the property. Here's proof of the 3 things I did today. And if they don't do that, they don't get paid for the day. So it's the same thing with the contractors. You know, you have alarm systems on there for very cheap that I have on my app when they go in, when they go out. So I'll ask them like, hey, what time were you in today? And if they're like, oh man, I was there at 9 o'clock, I know that they weren't there until noon, but I'll let them lie to me a couple of times. And then it's almost like I joke around when your kid gets into your donuts and comes in with chocolate all over her face and you go, hey, did you get Daddy's donuts? And they go, no, like, you know, they did. And that's what starts to happen is you have these things in place that you already know the answers to. You're just trying to find out, are you going to be honest with me? And usually if they're not, within that first week, they're not my person. They're out. I got to get somebody else. So, but that's really the management part of it. Like, you have to make sure you're setting expectations that they're communicating how you like to communicate. So if you don't like the text message, if you're not good with technology, you're going to need somebody that's good at getting on the phone and they want to talk to you all the time. Versus like Joey Diaz, you were saying the other day, Joe, I know you don't text me, you pick up the phone, you call. That's a guy that's going to be like, if I only text message, he and I are never going to work good together. Versus I'm a guy who's like, I need you to upload pictures, I need you to upload videos, and I just need you to text me a couple of times a day. You might be a great contractor, but if you have a flip phone and you don't know how to use Google Docs, you're not going to be a good guy for me. So it's those little things of like, even though the people might be good, you almost don't want to ask the bad questions where I give the dating analogy of like, oh man, the date's going so well. I don't want to ask her if she wants to have kids or not because things are I'm going to wait 6 years and then I'll like, but that's what people do, you know? So it's like, oh, but he's such a great contractor. She's such a great management person. I have a great realtor. I don't want to find out now that they're not okay calling me every day or uploading stuff to Google, but it's like, get to know now, get it out of the way now.
You want to be people that want to please everybody, right? People
yes. Yeah. And that's really like what that's the nuts and bolts of it. It really comes down to like getting multiple people in place first to have checks and balances to make sure your numbers in your areas are good. And then once you have those things in place, setting those proper expectations for communication and regular communication, no more than 2 or 3 days, and having resolutions in there for when, not if they come back and they're not doing those things, you're always the bad guy. How could you not pay me today? It's like, look, I told you, FaceTime me at 12, FaceTime me at 5. You didn't do it for 3 days, so you didn't get paid for 3 days. Like, I can train my kids to FaceTime you at 12 and 5 when they go to school and when they come home. If you can't do that, you shouldn't be renovating my $50,000 house. You shouldn't be fixing up my apartment building. So they're always mad about it, but you go back to, hey, we set this expectation up front. And I think that was a big thing over the years of deals that were going bad versus good, is starting to set those expectations as they were happening. And they're like, yeah, but we didn't talk about this. I'm very clear up front now of like, hey, this is how it's going to be. So if you have a problem with this, tell me now. So later on when it does come up, it's like, hey, no. Remember, like last Thursday, we talked about this. It's right there on the paper. You signed on it. And that eliminates like a lot, not all, but it eliminates a lot of the people up front because you're kind of getting, they just disappear. They stop calling you back. They don't sign the contracts and helps.
Same thing, right? With business, clear expectations, right? And then, things are less likely to go sideways.
Yeah. And they still do. And I think that again comes down to people skills and communications and conflict resolution, which is, I think, where jiu-jitsu helps in business.
Right. Speaking of jiu-jitsu, how did you get into jiu-jitsu?
So before I hurt my hand, I was a boxer, and I was trying to train in the Golden Gloves, and then
you grew up in Long Island.
Yeah, grew up in Long Island, moved to Manhattan for a little bit, but for the most part, like Long Island guy. And then when I was training for the Golden Gloves, hurt my hand, and then I remember after the two things when I like woke up from surgery, or before I went into surgery for my hand, I remember saying, I wish I would have taken more chances fighting, and I wish I would have bought more real estate. So I made these little notes in my phone of like, hey, if you get through these surgeries, make sure you just take advantage of every opportunity to fight and every opportunity to buy real estate. And I remember at that time, because it took me a long time for my hand to heal, I was like, oh, I'll get into kickboxing because now I can use not just two hands, but I can start using arms and legs and all that kind of stuff. But then you start getting your bell rung a little bit too much. And I was like, well, I probably should balance this out with something else. And my brother had trained with Serra.
Okay.
So I started at a different gym. And I remember I trained there for like 2 or 3 weeks. I didn't even really know like what jiu-jitsu was. I did a tournament, dislocated my shoulder in the first match. And this was like, it was illegal in New York. You had to go to New Jersey. And
illegal, right?
The tournaments were in like some basement of some church with like mats that were like made out of rock. You know what I mean? I hurt my shoulder, and then I needed a few months to heal up. And during that time, I was trying to find another place to go. And I remember Pete Dragosel. I was like, hey man, like where should I go train? Because everybody you ask would tell you, well, don't go to this place because they'll beat you up over there, and don't go here, they're mean. And don't go to that place. Serra's not even there, and like you'll get killed over there. And Drago was the only person who was like, man, jiu-jitsu is amazing. Just go do jiu-jitsu anywhere, and it's gonna change your life. Here's why I love training at Serra Jiu-Jitsu. And I was like, he was the only one that didn't try and build his gym up by tearing everybody else's down. I was like, that's the kind of people I want to be around. So I went down, and of course, Matt was there every day, all day. And, you find your tribe. So I went in there, I got my butt kicked, kind of like I did today with the cold plunge. And then I was like, man, like I either have to make the decision of I don't want to go back ever again, or I got to go back tomorrow and not get beat up as bad. But just the energy that Matt had in that place, and the people from the top down, I instantly just fell in love. I was like, man, where's this place been my whole life? And like him and that place have changed my life for sure.
What year was that?
It was all like right around the same time. So probably 2006, 2007, like right around there. Like the real estate and the jiu-jitsu thing happened almost like at the identical time of my life.
Wow. What were some of the things that you saw jiu-jitsu cross over into your professional life, like real estate and things like that?
So one of the first things that I think is super interesting is the community, having people around you that celebrate each other. I mean, like my brother's a musician. I got him into it, and I remember he was telling me, I wish my music friends celebrated each other with the same way my jiu-jitsu friends do. So I guess like in the music industry, somebody gets a record deal or something. It's like, oh, they suck. Our band should. Whereas here, it's like, oh man, like this dude just got his black belt. He just got promoted. It's like, good for him. He's here every day. Like I've watched Jason Rao on the medicine wall. Well, yeah, So like having people around.
You're
like
part
that,
of it. And you're part of their success.
Yeah.
You feel like you got it too with them.
I love that. So that taught me to first off find people that I could look up to that were Matt Serra he calls me Nicky Knuckles, but he was always like, Knuckles, water finds its own level. And like that's kind of what I found. Like that was my level of people. So that helped with a lot of the mental stuff that was going on from my hand injury. I felt like, and Matt always says it, he's like, Knuckles, man, this is the land of misfits toys. We all feel like we don't belong somewhere, but we all belong here. And I was like, man, this is like a place that I don't feel like uncomfortable going into, and people I can actually talk about my hand injury. And because, it was like very intimidating when it first happened. So I felt like that helped me
self-conscious,
mentally.
right?
Yeah. But then the other part of that is I felt like the problem solving and the conflict resolution part of that, where every day I felt like, man, I got these deals going, I got stuff going wrong, and you just think to yourself, I can't go to jiu-jitsu today. It's too busy. I have too much going on. But when then you actually get there, I realized that it's one of the only places where you have to, for me, I have to be in the moment. Whereas no matter how much I think I have something on my mind, the second a guy like here is berimboloing me or somebody's grabbing my neck, you instantly forget. You go, okay, I don't care about the contract. I got to block this. I got to watch my arm. I got to watch my neck. And before you know it, like the hour goes by and you forgot about all that stuff. And then when you get back in your car and you're driving home, you're like, oh, I know the answer to that problem now. Like I just do this, I just do that. And, you know, a longer answer, but my buddy, Santa Fe guy, actually, Ruben Rivera.
Okay.
Ruben Rivera, he's a Eddie Bravo black belt. But he was talking about his baby. And he goes, man, my baby is so amazing. Every night when she goes to sleep, she wakes up and it's like an iPhone that got powered down and wakes up with new features. Now it can wave, now it can smile, now it can crawl. And I feel like what jiu-jitsu did for me, it was my iPhone to update my software. Where as much as I was like on overload, it would let me shut down for an hour. And then it allowed me to see this whole new perspective on business that I didn't see before. And it also teaches you that when you're in a tough place and all you want to do is tap out and give up, you hold on for another minute and you go, okay, still, I'm not going to tap here. Let me take a breath. Let me take another second. And it teaches you to find a way out when you want to panic and you want to give up. And I feel like business and life, that's been one of the biggest things that jiu-jitsu and boxing taught me is you get in a comfortable position, you get your bell rung, you take a breath, and you find a way out. You know, and I think that when somebody once told me, I don't work for anybody, I work for the deal. And I thought that was really interesting because every single deal I've ever done, it's never, hey, Alberto, do you want to sell me your property at half of the value? Of course, they're always like, no. But you wait and you wait for the motivation to get up and 3, 4, 5, 6 months go by and eventually they call you back and they go, look, we didn't solve that problem. We really need to get rid of this property. Will you still buy it? And then you have to wait for that whole process to come through, but you're dealing with people that are emotional. So the lending falls apart, the wife says no, the husband says no, the attorney says, so you're constantly dealing with all these emotions of people that are upset because they're losing money or like every day the deal's falling apart and you have to put it back together. So being able to stay calm and say, I work for the deal and I have to manage all these different personalities. And while they're all freaking out, I have to stay calm.
Yeah.
That to me has been probably the key to success in just getting deals done.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's it, right? The emotional part, the emotional component is what fries people out, burns them out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Messes up the performance, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Fighters, jiu-jitsu. I had one of my black belts, on his black belt speech, he said, he was like, he went into investment banking. And in his black belt speech, he was like, man, all these guys in my, that were going through it too, they had to drink, they had to do drugs to be able to cope with, the ups and downs, right? And he was able to stay calm because of jiu-jitsu, like what you just said.
That's awesome.
That was really nice, really nice speech. I never forgot that.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Yeah. Nice, man. So what are some of the places that you like to go these days with, I don't know, with deals, or are you just all over the place?
So we're trying for commercial stuff all over the country. For residential stuff, I am trying to build more stuff just in Illinois now. So it's great having options everywhere, but what we're trying to do is build roots where we don't have to keep rebuilding the teams. That's
what I was going to ask you also on you find your people that you like working with, and then you work with them again, probably on other deals, right?
Yeah,
in the area, wherever you go.
Yeah. Because it becomes a test where, I think part of the other problem is just like jiu-jitsu, people want their black belts tomorrow. And I think you have to remember, as long as you don't think that you're going to be rich on Monday, Maul Easton he was like, hey man, that's my plan B. He's like, but the plan A is going great. I go, well, that's the best time to build the plan B because you don't want to wait until plan A falls apart and now you have to do it. You do it in the background when you don't have that additional pressure, and it makes life a lot easier. So you do one. You let the one go through. When that property is about to sell, now you go, okay, well, I had a good contractor. He did a great job. My realtor did a great job. They found me a buyer. My appraiser was spot on. It sold for exactly what they said the appraiser was going to be. The inspection was good. Nothing weird popped up. Like, everybody did their job. Now this property is going to sell in the next 30 to 60 days. Guys, go out and find me 2. And now you do those 2. You go through that same thing. It's at the same process. Those go to sell. Cool, now let's go do 4. So, but what happens every time is you have just enough, and it's interesting because the expectations, you ask the contractors, well, look, how many jobs can you take right now that won't make you over leveraged? Because contractors are always falling behind, always chasing the next deal. So they'll always say like, hey, Alberto, man, 3 company policy, we never do more than 3 at a time. But then all of a sudden you get 4 and they go, well, we'll take that. I go, what happened to, well, no, we got another guy, we got this, we got that. And then it turns into now they're scared that you're going to go hire another contractor and that's going to become your person. So they agree, they convince you that they can take on more than they can. And now they're falling behind on all 4. And now you wind up having to let them go. And so like stuff pops up that you usually want to have a few of them in your belt. There'll be 1 or 2 of them, but without fail, the joke is kind of, if things go great, you guys are going to break up. If things go bad, you guys are going to break up. So you have to constantly be rebuilding your teams. You have to constantly be looking for new talent. So you'll get like a life cycle of them, but inevitably, if they're not your only crew, they're dealing with other people. Somebody else screwed them. Some other job went long. Now they're trying to take it out. Like, so it's always a revolving door, but you can get like a good couple of years out of a good crew.
That's cool. I was going to ask you, like, I was just thinking of some of my guys in the black belts and stuff. They're like, yeah, I want to buy a house, but the house is so expensive now here in LA. You know, so how would you advise someone to, to build up some cash flow to be able to afford a house here in LA?
So if it's not necessarily for an investment, the rules are a little bit different. If I was younger and I could go back, I'd do it the way Ally Quinta did it, where you could do a house hack.
House hack.
Yeah, so you get some people to move in with you. Like Uriah Faber, I know, did the same thing where he would buy a house and then he would rent out the rooms to fighters and they'd all kind of train together and they'd cook together and they'd live together.
Have a bunch of roommates.
Yeah. And then eventually you're basically living for free and you're getting some equity pay down on there. And then you start to get a little bit of money and then another house in the block opens up, then you buy that house. So I think that that's a great way if you're younger and you're looking to get in, get some roommates, rent out some rooms, get that going in, or buy something that's a duplex, a triplex, or a fourplex, because it's still considered residential. And if you're going to live in one of those units, you can get a very low down payment loan. Now, the payments are going to be a little bit higher initially, but you only have to live in there for 1 year. Then you can move out, and you can rent out that 4th unit or that 3rd unit or that 2nd unit. So even if you had something that was a break even, when you're living in one, the next year, knowing that you can throw somebody in there, you got 3 or 4 people paying down your mortgages. Bad part to California is a place like this, the prices are high, but also when you look at like a 5, 6, 7, 8% increase in that equity, because you're paying more, you can make equity and profit in that a lot quicker. So there is that pro and con, that downside to the upside. If I was just going to go invest to buy a property right now to cash flow, it's going to be very hard here without having something that's multiple tenants in that house or multiple units of that house. I probably would go to another market that you can cash flow. Ohio's, Florida's, some of those Midwest areas, even
Florida,
some pockets in Arizona. Yeah.
They're from probably not Miami and those areas, but
no, Miami's gonna be a little tough.
The Panhandle, right, area.
Yeah, Tampa's still got some stuff. Orlando, but like I've always loved finding major cities like a Tampa or like a New York and looking at the suburbs around them. Like we always call them ripple markets. That like if you had a major
ripple
city,
markets,
let's say the major city was a pond, you drop a big boulder in the middle of that pond. It's going to make a big splash in the city, but the ripple effect is going to affect some of those other areas. So like when I say I do deals in Phoenix, I wouldn't do them necessarily in the heart of Phoenix. I'd find some place within an hour of Phoenix that people still commute back and forth for work. And those suburbs outside are great. Like Chicago suburbs. We're not in the city of Chicago, but we're within 35, 45 minutes of it. So you still have like a solid anchor with good life, good businesses, all that kind of stuff. There was another one I was just talking about that we were in, like even Georgia, like Atlanta. I used to invest in Atlanta, but we did so much better 30, 40 minutes outside of the center of the city because you have less competition from these big funds. The houses tend to be less expensive, be a little bit more desirable. So you can get like twice the house for half the price with half the competition. And over the course of 5, 10 years, people keep moving out of the cities, especially during the pandemic. You saw a huge surge of that, and those values come up so you can get better cash flow.
How do you find those houses? How do you find those areas?
So initially, I look for that city, and then I start looking out for realtors and brokers, and I let them guide me. So, like for instance, they'll start to say, like, "Well, hey, again, fishing ponds. Like, hey, let me find the areas where, like, my 2 big metrics are how fast are houses selling and how recently have they sold." So they call them DOM for days on market and DOS for days of sale. So if I see that they go, hey, Nick, here's Atlanta. And they show me some areas. Like, this is literally how I found it. So she goes, well, here's an area, but it's super competitive. It's like still in the city. She's like, but I work 10 minutes outside in this other thing. Okay, cool. Like, let me see the houses over there. She starts to send me some like comparables of like, hey, here's what sold in the last 6 months. But everything's a little bit of the Wild West. It's not fixed up homes like I fixed up. The days on market are 100 days. Nothing's really sold in the last 30, 60, 90 days. I have to give them that feedback of like, hey, this isn't really what I'm looking for. I need some place that I can make sure I can turn this house in 30 to 60 days. And if I can see that it took under 60 days to sell that house, and a house exactly like that sold within the last 60 days, I can feel it pretty good that there's demand for what I'm selling. So when we say like the comparables come in, the more I tell them, hey, just find the areas, I'll reach out to tons of them and I'll say, you tell me, like, where's the place you would be investing? And then I just let them send me that data. And a lot of the times the data is wrong, but when I correct them, I go, these are the types of areas I'm looking for, not these. They'll come back and tell you like, hey, not Pasadena, Altadena, not Altadena, Burbank. Like, and that's where you'll start to find 5, 10 different little cities that you go, okay, these are our metrics. And then it's a matter of just putting offers out until you get one accepted. And then whichever one you get accepted, that's where you hyper-focus. And that's literally what happened. That's why I say fishing lines. I'll find 5, 10, 15 different cities that other realtors, brokers, or investors are telling me are good areas. And then I just put fishing lines out in all those ponds. And over the course of a few months, you catch 2 here and 2 here, and you go, cool. Now I'm going to build my teams up there.
Nice. If somebody doesn't have, I'm thinking of, one of my younger guys that maybe they don't have too much down payment, or, what are some creative ways now with, it's not like it was 2007, 8, with the money being so easy to get, but how would you recommend for them to get their down payment and get started?
Primary residence or for an investment property?
Either one.
So for primary residence, you could look into an FHA loan where you have to put less down. In California, with the high price point, it's still going to be a lot of money. So one of our favorite strategies right now is subject to. So subject to is you could take over somebody's payments. So if they have a low mortgage interest rate already that they've locked in for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you can negotiate a creative financing deal where literally maybe you give them some money down. We did one recently that it was literally no money down. And it's just a seller that just needs out of the property, and they allow you to take title and take deed, but they leave the loan in their name. So the payments are lower, because even if they got a mortgage 2 or 3 years ago, it could have been 2, 3, 4%. And if they have some equity built in the house, you're good.
You gotta be cold calling, right? Reaching out. How do you find people like that?
Yeah.
So that's a lot of work.
That is. Yeah, but see, that's the thing. So we had somebody recently, I was teaching a class, and this lady came up to me, Nicole and I own a cell phone tower, and I was telling her about the cell phone tower that we own, and she goes, well, I want one of those. How do I get those? And I go, well, like, you can find them in these areas. And she goes, well, like, what's the first step I do? I go, well, I would look and I would call the carriers and ask them what their requirements are for what kind of land they need to build those just like an intermediary, but like maybe it's 10 acres and within this area and this area. And she goes, I don't want to call those people. That sounds like a lot of work. And I was like, well, then don't do it. Like, but like all these things are, it's like, hey, I want a black belt, but I have to show up 3 days a week for 10 years. Yeah. So it's one of those things where like, if you want a great real estate deal with little or no money down in California that might have equity and you don't really need to put anything down, like, how bad do you want that? Do you want it bad enough to pick up the phone or not?
There's a guy on Instagram that makes this post like, yeah, just without sleeping, I do this, and no money down, and I, like a joke, right?
Yeah.
Real. It's like, yeah, it's work. It's work. You got to do work.
Yeah.
You got to do work like anything else.
And patience, because it is one of those things. Like even that deal that I was talking about that we got with the no money down subject to deal, she said no for months and months and months, and then eventually it turns into a yes, because you have to find somebody that's just motivated enough to either give you a great price or give you great terms. But I think that you're in a prime place for it right now, because some people, they want the price that they want. It's like, cool, you want that price, I'll give you that price, but I need the interest rate, because the interest rate's what makes it still affordable for me to come in there. So if you have like an off market, you won't find that as much with a realtor, but it is happening a little bit more and more. But off market, you can definitely find that stuff with calls, or even now, if you work with people, like there's other investors that specialize in finding subject to deals. And you can go to Facebook groups and things like that and find people that have put those in place, and you give them like 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 grand, depending on the deal. And then they'll basically sell you that property with creative financing.
It's a numbers game, huh?
Yeah.
Numbers game. Just like jiu-jitsu, you got to put the reps in.
Yeah.
Drill it, do the work.
Yeah, you got to take some beatings. It's just a bunch of no's to get to the yes. That's all it is.
So you started jiu-jitsu around 2006 ish.
Yeah, right around that.
Okay. What year did Matt win the UFC beat GSP?
I think 2007 or 8. Because I started the year that he was on The Ultimate Fighter as a contestant. So whatever year season 4 was, I started training before he went off to the show. And then I remember he went off to the show, and the first live UFC I ever went to was when he fought Chris Lytle in the finale, and Travis Lutter fought, I forget who he fought.
Anderson Silva, no?
Well, he won it to fight Anderson Silva.
Right.
Yeah.
I forgot to, yeah.
So that was like the finale that he got to fight Anderson, and I remember Drago fought Scott Smith on that card, I think it was. So
where he knocked him out,
yeah,
and they dropped him, and then we thought it was done, and then one more punch.
Yeah, dude. And it was crazy because that was at I think it was the Joint at the Hard Rock, and I think there was a cage and 2 rows, and then like a little area where people can stand. Like the whole place might have held 600 people.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, one of the guys. Yeah, it's tiny.
Yeah, but I mean, and that was the ultimate finale then, and now it's like, you know, Aya Quintus fighting in front of 28,000 people in New Zealand. Like it's insane how it's like grown like that. But yeah, that was maybe like a year after that, after I started.
Wow. Okay. And then how was it when he got the title shot?
Dude.
And then he did the impossible. What was that like?
It was great, man. So
were you able to go to the fight at that time?
I didn't go to the fight. No, I went to the second one, which he's always going to be like, don't talk about the second one. Yeah, so I went to the second one though. But
the first one was the
first one was the one.
Yeah.
But I remember watching it at home with my mom and my brother and my friend Liz Waldes, and like all of a sudden he hit him and he was rocked, and like we all flew off the couch. We were like, oh my God, you know. And then he came back obviously the next day, and there was like cards. My mom actually went. She's funny. She bought him a card. And like she didn't even tell me. She goes, "Oh, I went down to the academy and I saw Matt, and I gave him a card, and it was like congratulations on your win." And there was like a little ninja in the front, and you opened up, and the card started singing like kung fu fighting, and I was like, "Mom, don't do that," you know. But he was like, "Oh, your mom's so nice." But everybody was like so happy for him. But it was interesting because it's different the way like when Weidman won.
Yeah.
I think just because he's a huge guy, I think it was still that time in the UFC where people would meet Matt, and he's the nicest guy. As long as you're not a dick, like he's the coolest guy ever. Well, you know, longer than I have. But he, you know, people would still kind of challenge him. Like, I don't get it. Like, I would watch people challenge Drago. I'd be like, dude, his job is to beat people up. Whose job it is to beat people up? Why do you think you were going to? So, but it was cool. It was cool, like, watching him just, like, be happy and get the support and be able to kind of shove it up everybody's ass. Because I remember he heard, like, Rogan and Dana talking about how he was going to get killed. And after he was like, oh, like, watch so. And that's why cool. Like, again, like, being around those people, the way that I'll hear Longo say, like, we didn't care that nobody believed in us. We believed in us. And I was like, man, those are the guys I want to be around. Like, that's the kind of stuff. So I actually took amateur fights right around that time just so I could be part of that, because I remember if you weren't fighting, it was like everybody get out of the gym, like only the guys who were getting ready for stuff. So I was like, I want to be part of this training and what's going on. And, you know, I remember like I fought the same weekend that Matt fought in Canada for the second fight. And I remember he gave me this whole speech about like the hero and the coward, and they both feel the same, and like what you do with it, and just be down to fight. And I was like, this was worth the whole thing. Like, I got to sit down, and like Matt gave me this kind of like going off to war speech, and like stuff like that you'll never forget. That I was like, even if I get my ass kicked, like just being around that energy of getting ready for a title fight, and like having people just, you know, kind of have everybody's back was so cool, man.
Man, I think I went out. I was in 2007. I went out to Long Island. I was with Sean Williams, and I went to Matt's house, and we went to Ray's gym because I was going to fight Roger Juarez at the time.
Oh, wow.
So they were helping me out, and I had a great time, man. I had a great time. Ray was there. It was before Chris Weidman, I think. When did he come in?
Probably like 2010, maybe around there.
Yeah. But it's been really cool to see Matt. Like, he was a pioneer, right? Not just in, you know, for Long Island, but like for jiu-jitsu in America and the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, and people always underestimated him because he's, you know, shorter, right? And I would say, right?
Stocky. He's
stocky, right? Okay. But they always underestimated him, how tough and how good he was. Yeah. And I really represented New York and East Coast, and, you know, put things on the map. The first time I met him actually was he was sleeping, and how hard he worked for so many years, right? This is back in did I go down to Brazil the first time? 1990s, 1997, 6, something like that. He was living during the week in the city when Hanzo and Kukuc, how do you say his last name?
Craig Kukuk?
Kukuk had the gym together still. And Matt would sleep during the week there and then go home to Long Island on the weekend, he would tell me. But his job was to basically run the gym, right?
Yeah. I think he was working a security booth, and Henzo was
also.
dude, get out of the security booth, and I'll just pay you whatever.
Is that what happened?
Here and
right,
yeah, because he always says, he's like, man, Henzo saved my life.
Like a toll booth.
Yeah,
or something, right?
yeah.
That's right. I think I read about that somewhere.
Yeah. And then he was living in his academy.
A toll booth, right?
I don't know if it was. I think it was a security booth. But
okay.
Henzo had that whole story about the person that he met at the toll booth that he became friends with, and like that whole. I literally end every class I teach with that because I think it's the craziest story ever. Where Henzo,
what was the story? Yeah.
So I might butcher this, but it's on the UFC Unfiltered podcast. Yeah. But he basically like he went through a toll booth and he was trying to tell this lady, like, how's your day going? And she was like, dude, 50 cents. 50, like, didn't want to put up with this. And, he was Henzo, so he was like, I'm going back there tomorrow. I'm going back. And he just kept going back and going back and going back and just being nicer and nicer and nicer. And eventually she opened up and she was like, okay, like, here's how my day is. Here's how this is. And then they became friends and then they started like hanging out. And when he was on like the podcast, he was like, hey, I got to leave early. I'm going to the retirement party for my friend. And they were like, who's your friend? And then he backtracked the whole story to like this lady who basically like told him to go screw himself in the toll booth 15 years earlier. And now he's going to her retirement party. And like everybody was like, dude, why didn't you just go to the Easy Pass lane? And he's like, because either you change people or people change you. And I was like, that's some deep Henzo shit right there. That's pretty awesome.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
That's it. Either people change you or you change the people.
Yeah, it's deep, right?
Wow. Yeah. Wow, so many years. He went to New York, and when did he go to New York? Like mid-90s, right? He moved 96, 97. Amal Easton worked on his hand after his fight with Oleg Tutarov. In Rio, so he went to Amal Easton. He went to acupuncture school, and he's like, I think I went all those years to school for one moment, and that moment was to help work on Renzo Gracie's hand after he hurt it fighting Oleg Tutarov.
That's cool.
And then after that, they formed a friendship, and all these years later,
that's awesome.
He's a black belt and runs Colorado, right, with jiu-jitsu, and
that's really cool.
Yeah, wow. Man, what we're out here in LA. What are you excited to do? What do you when you come out to LA? What are you excited to do?
Honestly, I'm usually just like I want to eat some food. Jason Eisner. I want to do some jiu-jitsu with Alberto Crane and get some sun. Other than that, man, that's literally like
jiu-jitsu,
food and jiu-jitsu. That's like the only thing. People would be like, man, you're so boring. But I'm like, but that's what I love. I love getting up early. Because you make these relationships. Like you and I connected, and then you're like, man, I can't wait to go back there. Why? How can I find an excuse to go out there? And like literally, we're trying to find a place to just go. It was like, well, we got this coming up, we got that coming up, and it was like, yeah, but it's in Burbank. What else are we doing in Burbank? I was like, Alberto's in Burbank. Like, let me go in, let me get some jiu-jitsu in there, and just hang out, meet some good people.
You always make time to wherever you go, right, to do jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And meet up with whoever's out there.
Yeah, but it's so hard getting people to wake up early. So I appreciate that you're always like, yeah, like 5 a.m. Let's do it.
Yeah, Matt Serra. I was like, I think you called the gym a couple times.
Yeah.
And you're like persistent, and then you're like, you dropped Matt Serra's name, and I was like, oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, it's funny. I was telling Nicole.
Remember that?
Yeah, because I was like, hey, man, how much for a private? You're like, I don't know. I don't do them. I'm like, what? You're like, I just did it because you said you were Matt's guy. I was like, that's awesome. Cool. I'll definitely tell him. He always says great things about you, man. Obviously. It's like you said, water finds its level. Me and you connected immediately. I didn't even realize you guys were that close, so it's cool.
Yeah, awesome, man. Yeah, we started doing a little Tecfit right in the mornings, moving in some into flow and those things.
Dude, that was so. My buddy Jeremy, he trains with Dominic Cruz out there, but I remember like I saw him that weekend, and I'm used to like we'll get together all day, and then after we roll, everything will start to tighten up, my neck, my back, everything. Like especially I've had like bulging herniated discs, and then the next day when I was coming in, I expected to basically come in and be half of what I was the day before from all the pain. And I remember when I walked in, I was like, oh, like, this is so weird. Like, I feel really good. And you were like, that's Tecfit. That's what we did yesterday. And I was like, holy crap. And I didn't even realize. And then I never felt that good. Like, I didn't realize. I started feeling blood flow to my legs. And then like my knee was giving out every time, like from the flights from New York to Chicago.
Right.
I'd get up on the plane and I'd fall over when I got up. And then me and you did some stuff for like 15 minutes. And I got off the plane. I was like, I can move my leg. I'm not falling over. Like, that's what opened my eyes to it, that I was like, man, like even 10, 15 minutes change. I hadn't felt that good in years, dude. It was crazy.
Awesome, man. Yeah, the proper like warm up, right? And then the proper cool down, even more important, right?
Yeah.
The cool down afterwards to turn off all the muscles you used, right? So you release the tension in the body.
Yeah. Even today, like, so I haven't rolled in a while. I'm having some like neck issues. So I was like, let me go easy. But we did a few rounds, and then even the cool down after, I feel great right now, man. I feel great. I can feel like the blood flow through my shoulders, because I was a little worried. I was like, I'm gonna get in trouble if I'm injured after we roll. So that's why I was like, I did a few. I'm okay, but it just opens everything up, man.
Nice, man.
Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. We'll look forward to doing the cold plunge with you next.
Yeah, I gotta redeem myself. It's terrible.
We'll have some fun. Well, awesome to get to talk to you in person. You know, we've been on Zoom and on the podcast, not on the mats. You know, so it's cool to share this friendship and our relationship, and just talk old stories too about Matt, Serra, and some of those times. It's really cool.
Dude, I appreciate you. Always make time. You're always a good guy. And when we connected, I didn't even realize like your whole backstory, man. I was just like, oh, it's just a great day. I hung out, we did jiu-jitsu, and then I realized like all this like inspiring stuff that you've done and all the things that you've overcome, man. You've become a hero of mine, and it's very nice to be able to become friends with somebody that you look up to and respect so much. So the fact that you've opened up your doors to me and my friend here, man, it's I can't thank you enough,
Thank you, brother.
It's been a
pleasure. Thank you so much, man. How can people find you?
So
and learn about some of your real estate. You know, you have your podcast.
the A Game podcast.
The A Game podcast.
Yeah. Easiest website in the world. It's nick3nicks.com/links, LINKS. If you go to that, you'll see all the ways to listen to the podcast and all the ways to connect me on social media. I'm probably most active on Instagram, so if you message me on some of the other stuff, I might miss it, but either connect with me right on there. I tell people, too, if you're interested in the real estate side, if you text me at 516-540-5733, text the word real estate, we can have a conversation of if you want to buy properties, sell properties, or partner on some level. That would be the best way to do it.
Awesome. Thanks, brother.
Thank you, bro.
Thank you.